Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So welcome everybody. Just get comfortable, settle in, and today we're going to be undertaking very meritorious activity of trying to set aside a day for practice, and as much of this day as you can devote to it, and say sadhu or it as well, because this is worthwhile. This is good action, yeah. And like I said, taking the precepts and talking Dhamma and just all of the little things that we do to organize our life to make this possible, that is right speech. But today we're going to take it a step further, and we're going to devote the day to looking at something which is a bit murkier and harder to understand, and that is the aspect of right thought or right intention in Buddhism. And this is an aspect of the path which is important and which is seemingly, obvious. What we're thinking about, what we're intending to do, is what manifests as our speech and actions. And yet trying to figure out how to work on this is not so obvious. And so it's been very interesting to explore this, and we get to explore this together today. So I'll give a bit of a reflection and some ideas for how to practice in the morning. We'll then have a period of sitting and walking, and we'll do one-on-ones during the lunch break, and then we'll come back in the afternoon and give another reflection, and we'll practice in that way. And if you have any lingering questions or comments, ideas that you'd like to float, the last half an hour we'll set aside for questions and answers and discussion. Yeah, so this is not as much of like I give the answers and that's the way things are. We're dealing with the mind here, and you've each got a mind, and what the reality that is presented to your mind and the way that you work with that reality is yours. Yeah, so if any of this doesn't seem to match or doesn't seem to make sense, just set it to the side. You can do with this whatever you want, and you try to use this to encourage your exploration, your exploration of the noble truths. Yeah, where is it that our suffering comes from, and where is it that we get free from our suffering? Where is it that we achieve this thing that all beings are trying to get, which is happiness, right? So to begin, let's take a quick look at an example of where intention is mentioned in the suttas. I think it's always good to start with a sutta when we can. This is also why I always starting out with a homage to the Buddha, because we're not just inventing as we go along. This has been explained, and this comes from the Majjhima Nikaya number 117. So this is the middle length discourses, and this sutta is about the Eightfold Path, and it goes into explanations of the Eightfold Path. And this is one place where we see Samma Saṅkappa, or right intention. And here the Buddha explains it as thus. He says, bhikkhus, right view comes first. One who understands wrong intention as wrong intention and right intention as right intention has right view. Okay, so the Buddha's going to lay out, what is wrong intention, what is right intention, and getting on board with this and understanding that this is the way that things affect each other. This is the way they play out. This is right view for us. And this is the first step, just coming to understand what is right thinking and wrong thinking, right intention, wrong intention. And what is wrong intention? The intention of sensual desire, the intention of ill will, and the intention of cruelty. This is wrong intention. So the Buddha says, then what is right intention? Right intention, I say, is twofold. There is right intention that is affected by taints, partaking of merit, ripening, and acquisition. And there is right intention that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path. What is the right intention that is affected by taints, partaking of merit, ripening, and acquisitions? The intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, the intention of non-cruelty. And what is the right intention that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path? The thinking, thought, intention, mental absorption, mental fixity, directing of mind, and verbal formations in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. This is right intention. That is the noble intention that is a factor of the path. When one makes an effort to abandon wrong intention and enter upon right intention, this is one's right effort. Mindfully, one abandons wrong intention and enters and abides in right intention. This is right mindfulness. Thus, these three states run and circle around right intention. That is right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. You can see in this simple presentation, we have kind of what the Buddha does to lay out intention as a factor of the path. And we don't find a whole lot else explicitly where the Buddha is saying, well, the intention is this. This is what you're doing. This is what you're cultivating. Because we can see in this brief explanation that it's dealing with everything that we do with our mind. And this is where the factor of the Eightfold Path that we call intention, right intention, is sometimes translated as right thought, or right thinking, because Saṅkappa, the Pali word, is closely related to vitakka, which is a word you might recognize, which we use for applied thought or pointing the mind at a topic, or and thinking about something. And so Saṅkappa is very similar to that. How are we pondering? How are we reflecting on things? How are we motivating the mind? In what direction are we motivating it? To this degree, it's kind of obvious when we start to watch our mind that it's motivated either in the right direction or the wrong direction, right? When we really want something, we can kind of sense it. Even if we're doing our best to restrain ourselves, we can kind of sense that there's this underlying like, oh, I'd really like to get that. And even if we're trying to be good and practice renunciation, we might be finding the mind trying to lawyer its way around and still get its intended juicy little treat. Likewise, when we really don't like something, or we're really averse to something, we often sense in the mind, it's like, oh, I just really wish that person wasn't here right now. I wonder if there's some way I could make them leave or make them so uncomfortable that they decided to leave on their own. Wouldn't that be nice? It would be so much nicer if they weren't here. And so whether or not we're speaking or acting, our mental landscape is still being colored by the direction of our thoughts. Yeah. And this is what we mean by saṅkappa, our intention. Yeah. When we are thinking in this way, when we are directing the mind in this way, whether or not we develop that into speech and thought, we are creating momentum in that direction. Yeah. So that speech and thought is possible in that direction. But now, if we are thinking in, right intention, if we are developing thoughts and ideas and perspectives in the direction of renunciation, we're thinking, oh, I have this thing, I don't really need it, and other people can really use it. And then somebody comes along and say, hey, do you have a such and such? And we say, oh, yeah, actually, yeah, here, help yourself. Use it as long as I'm not really using it at the moment. We were cultivating an intention of renunciation, reflecting on how we don't really need it. It's useful, but not necessarily to us. We're thinking about how useful it could be to other people, and we've given ourselves the momentum in the direction of renunciation, of letting be, of letting go, of sharing, of giving. of nurturing others through that object. Yeah. And so right thinking leads to right speech and right action. The Buddha divides this in two different ways. So we have right intention, which ripens in merit and a continued rebirth. And this is what the right thinking, like I just described, like, oh, this thing is really valuable. Maybe somebody else can use it. It's good. It's right. It generates pleasant results in the world, but it is still wrapped up in the notion of self and the notion of the object has value, the object has beauty, that it has some intrinsic characteristics. And many of us in the modern day, we've been trained to do this with certain things. Like we see an orange and we're like, wow, it's just loaded with vitamin C. We don't know that. We've been trained to think that way, right? Or we see a nice green leafy vegetable and we're like, oh, that's healthy. That's good for me. And we impart intrinsic value on that thing. Well, it's not in that thing. It's a plant. There's plants all over the place. Yeah. This one isn't intrinsically better without an us. Big leafy vitamin filled vegetable is useful for us as a human being, but not so much for a cat, right? So you need a self for that value to arise. And so right intention that is still dealing with self and value is right intention that is still in the realm of the asava, or the taints, the outflows, the corruptions of mind. There's still room for wrong intention to come back in there. But when our intention completely is let go and there is no self, there is no value judgment, then we have what's called noble in right intention. Yeah. And this is as the Buddha described. When we come to understand intention, we actually start to abandon intention. And so the right intention that is a factor of the path actually deals with us beginning to let go of these processes of the mind where we are trying to get a result, where we are trying to act in the world, where we are trying to influence the world. Yeah. So the Noble Eightfold Path leads towards relinquishment, cessation, peace, nibbana, not to more activity, not to more holding on, not to more deciding right and wrong. It deals to being okay with things, being cool, being even and balanced and calm. That is the direction of the path. To get there, we're going to have to get into the nuts and bolts of what is intention? Where is it coming from? How do I work with it? Probably when we were told, abandon wrong intention and cultivate right intention, we tried to do that. And we're like, well, what intention do I have right now? I think it's right intention. I'm sitting here, I'm listening to the monk. It's probably right intention. Just looking around, it's probably right. But is it? Am I doing this to try to get something? Am I doing this to try to look good? Is it people gonna be like, yeah, you listen to Dhamma, you're a good, virtuous Buddhist person? Oh, I don't know. Maybe I am doing this selfishly. And we can, like, I know because I've done it. We've all done this, yeah? We've all started to question why we're doing what we're doing. And part of this comes from, it's not so obvious how this whole intention mechanism works. And to really understand it, we've got to step back and see that there's some things that are going to get in the way. And one is our idea of choice. Yeah? There is a dichotomy. We're struck between two extremes in the world. And one is determinism and one is sort of free will. One is fate. Everything's pre-decided. We're just playing out, our karma. And the other is we are making choices in every moment. It's totally up to us. When we look at the world, we realize it's somewhere in between. We're getting pitched, karma. Well, there's habits, there's stuff that's already happening, and we are doing, and we don't know why we're doing. But there's also things that are happening to us, and we don't know why they're happening to us. Yeah. But at the same time, it's pretty clear we have some control over how we direct our mind. Yeah. So this is the first thing that we work with, is that not everything that we're doing is intentional. It's a mix. Some of this is the past energies are directing the activity, and we are getting swept along with that to some degree. So this is the first thing that we recognize when we're looking for intention. You know, we do have some choice, but at the same time, we should not assume that we are choosing everything in this one moment. So we can kind of relax when we're searching for our intention. It might not be obvious to us. It might be, there might be preconditions happening. But we can ask, like, what am I choosing to focus on? This is the first aspect, whereas we can see that even though we don't necessarily know where the past energies are coming from, we can still check in with what we're deciding to look at. Are we directing our mind, well, okay, maybe I should let go, maybe I should relax, maybe I should be okay, maybe I should cultivate tolerance? Or are we saying, like, how do I get away from this? How do I get that thing? How do I make that person pay for that thing that they did? Yeah, if we're cultivating that, then that, even if it's not immediately directing our actions, where that is part of the, that is a choice part, yeah, which is enough, right? At the surface level, the Buddha is just saying something that's kind of, it's kind of straightforward, right? Um, kind of straightforward. Well, most people in the world care about what you say and what you do. And there's this idea that, well, your thoughts are your own. And it's almost like taboo to be like, you know, well, what were you thinking bad things about me? It's almost like, well, we've always got some thoughts in there that we're kind of embarrassed about, right? And we don't want people to see them, because if we were responsible for what we're thinking, it would be a complete mess. Luckily, we're not totally responsible for what we're thinking. Yeah, some of it is we're choosing to think that way, but some of the thoughts are preconditioned, and we've not always been a good, virtuous Buddhist, right? Sometimes we preconditioned all kinds of naughty thoughts that'll come up at the wrong moments. And this is, yeah, this is the surface level aspect of intention. Just looking at what are we thinking about? What direction are we thinking? Yeah. And the Buddha pitches this to us, but part of where, because when we put our energy into something as practitioners, we tend to put a lot of energy into it, right? We want to do it better. We want to do it bigger. We want to understand more. Yeah. And so we go to the books, and then we start to get a little twisted up, right? Part of when you do analysis of these things, you try to do like scientists. Yeah. You come at this and you're like, there should be, and this is big in science, there should be a theory of everything, right? There should be a way to get this to all fit together, like a way to explain intention that makes sense moment to moment to moment, that kind of lays out the mind like a diagram. This happens and this happens and this happens. And we do have that to a degree in dependent origination, right? We have the Buddha saying, well, look, ignorance conditions volitional formations, conditions consciousness, conditions mind and body, mind and matter, conditions the sense bases that arise and take in a contact with the sense objects. Right? And when we start to ask where intention is in that, then we start to get spun out, and we realize that in dependent origination, intention is showing up in more than one place. Now we have, it was said volitional formations, but it's a different word, Saṅkhāra. Yeah, but this is actually related to our intention. It preconditions these the intentional ideas that are out of our control, that are acting upon us rather than we are acting upon. These are saṅkhāras that are coming in before consciousness. Before consciousness, how does That's not fair. If our intention is happening before we're conscious, then we can't do anything about it, right? Well, this is where, if we take a step back, we realize maybe there isn't a theory of everything. And we start to relax again, and we realize we practice by the middle way. Yeah, there's no one theory that's going to solve it all, but we can still make some sense of what's going on in a way that will help us practice and help us investigate our mind, yeah, to figure out what's going on so that we can stop all the stuff that's making us suffer. And it kind of, this is the part where I kind of reading my audience, and it's like, this is not the best example for you, but it is a really good example. There is actually a really good model for understanding how intention plays out in our lives, in our world. That explains it both in terms of like moment to moment, and in the overarching way the Buddha says, like, what's the intention? You're intending to go to the store? Well, then that's the intention that plays out. You're intending to opening the car door to get in the car? Well, that's the intention that's playing out. A theory that can kind of accommodate both, even without like dicing things up. And this example goes back to my own history, which may seem like not that long ago. Long ago, there was a Tahn Pamutto who was much smaller and younger, and he had hair and he had glasses, and he didn't wear orange. He never wore orange. And this young Tahn Pamutto would sit in a basement and play video games with one of these little controllers. Yeah. And I just setting the scene for you, because I know this is not something necessarily any of you can relate to, but if you can imagine young Tahn Pamutto playing these video games, he thought he was the character in the game, right? And the game was playing out, but every time something would happen that would kind of break that illusion, he would get upset. Sometimes he would press the button and the character wouldn't jump in time and would fall into a pit and die, and he would get upset because he had pressed the button. He thought he was in control of the character, but it still died. And just in various ways, it started to occur to him he was not the character, and that was upsetting because he was getting the consequences of that character, right? Whether he won or lost the game was the character acting in the world. Yeah, so it meant a lot to him that he was in control of it, but he wasn't really. And the video game is a great way of sort of modeling intention in our lives, to basically to simplify things. A video game is projected on a TV or a computer or something, and it has a couple of steps. One is you have physics, you have math. It tries to figure out, the variables, the program, what's happening in the game. This information is sent to a renderer, something that creates a world. Basically, it decides in space and in time where all the various things are. And this is sent to a display part of the program that cuts a slice out of it, decides where the viewer is, and puts that slice up on the TV to show them a piece of the world and all of the information they should get to understand what's going on. And it does this in a loop because it takes so much time to figure out the math and then render it and then display it. By the time it's displayed things will have started, it'll be ready for things to change again. So it goes back around and it iterates, it creates the next step, the next second, the next millisecond, and it does it again. It does the physics, it does the rendering, it does the display. And now little Tahn Pamutto is sitting there with his Nintendo controller, and he wants the character to do something, but where is he in this? Unfortunately, by the time the physics are done and the world is created, he cannot change what happens to the character. He can't input anything to change the physics because they're already done. Yeah, and he can't once the display comes up on the TV, he can't change the rendering. He can't change the way that things look because that's already done. Yeah. All that he's getting is a display, a little piece, a viewpoint on the world that's been created. And he gets to decide, does he want to do an input? And if he does an input, that input gets sent to the physics because it iterates back around. So little Tahn Pamutto is not changing the world when he presses a button. He is giving data for the next round of physics to kind of alter things. And if the next round of this program takes that data, it can change the way that things go. The little character moves in a different direction based on the input. But if little Tahn Pamutto doesn't press an input, then it will just keep doing whatever it was doing in this loop until Tahn Pamutto just can't help it anymore and wants to take control, wants to win the game, and starts pressing buttons. Now, this is a really good example of the sense world that we live in, yeah? And it's not a coincidence, because when people were trying to figure out how to make interactive games, they were obviously modeling something. And what they're modeling is kind of the world that we live in. We live in a sensual world, which is, by the time that consciousness arises, at the impact of one of our senses, the eyes or the ears and the nose or the tongue or our body, with an object, it's too late to change what's happening. We are just getting pitched this data from the senses, yeah? We can't make any input because that moment has already happened. We are just perceiving that moment. But what we can do is decide how we feel about that, yeah, and then decide if we want something to change. And this is where our intention actually is. So I drew a little picture to kind of show what this cycle looks like. Yeah. And we've got, this is the moment, this is the now as we perceive it. You know, consciousness, sense bases, we've got perception, we feel something based on what we're perceiving. You know, do I like this? Do I not like this? And that leads to craving, clinging, becoming, you know, these various patterns. This is described in dependent origination. But now it's already, the moment has already happened as we're thinking about it, as we're exploring what we think about it and what we would like to do about it. Yeah. And we decide if we want things to just keep going the way they are, if we just want to let them go and let them ride, or do we want to change something? Now, this period in here it's still after the moment, but this is what we call Saṅkappa. This is, I'm not actually sure if you can see my cursor there. This is what we thinking, yeah? We're pondering, we're creating a direction, a momentum, you know, what do we want to have happen? Yeah? But this is after the moment. What happens now in this step is, if we do want something to change, again, we're not in direct control. We might think we are. We might think that we are the character, but we're not really. And this body, if we really explore it, we are not this body. It's often doing things that we're not in conscious control of, yeah? This is more a vehicle for sense experience. How is it that we can control it then? And this is one of the curiosities with intention. How does the mind, which doesn't have a form, which doesn't have a place in space, how does it control a body? The way it does is through something we call Saṅkhāra, or volitional formations. And these are something that you can perceive. While you can't necessarily perceive the place of the mind or the activity of the mind, you can perceive the product of this. And so when the moment arrives again with consciousness and sense bases and all of that, there might be something else there. And it's this sort of energy, for lack of a better word, of movement, of intention, of resistance, of clinging, of tightness, of pushing away, of pulling towards, of all sorts of, yeah, energy. And we call it energy because it doesn't match our body. It's more like we feel this compulsion to do a particular thing, and the body either acts on it or doesn't act on it. And if it doesn't act on it, that tends to feel a little unpleasant, to kind of like have all of this compulsion that we're not acting on. But that's all that happens. It's just a feeling. And if it's not going to do any harm to not act on it unless it's causing us to tense our muscles, in which case, yeah, eventually it can make us a little unwell. But this is how this process works. Yeah. Every moment we have this iteration of consciousness and perception and craving and clinging if these arise. And then but outside of this all, experiencing this all, there is this mind, which is not the consciousness, which is one of these really weird Buddhist concepts where we realize, oh, wow, all of the consciousness and perception and feeling and sense bases and stuff, that deals with like the character. And yet there is still this mind that is thinking and processing and deciding what it wants to do about something, kind of on the, a bit removed from that. Yeah. And watching it go through all this iteration. And this iteration is happening within that mind. And so there isn't a one theory of everything that includes the minds, because the mind is kind of a little bit, well, it's more profound than that. But nevertheless, everything that involves suffering with us still falls within this, yeah? So this is this cycle that we've got with intention. And in any moment, we might have these saṅkhāras showing up. And this is where we can look to try to figure out what our intention is in the moment. Do we feel relaxed? Do we feel free? Do we feel at ease with the way things are? Or do we feel tense? Do we feel compelled to move, to do something, to react? Well, that is the built-up energy of having thought in a couple of directions. I want this to happen. I want that to happen. I want to get away from this. I want to stop that. Yeah, that builds up. And the mind can't influence the world. It doesn't own the body, but it can build up these volitional formations which compel something to happen. Yeah. So when we ask, what is my intention at the moment, we're not going to get just one. And if you check in with your body and you look for any tension or clinging or compulsion or discomfort, basically anything that can be productive of suffering, yeah? Any restlessness, any torpor, you're going to find more, you're going to find a lot of it. And this is the thing, we're not just having one intention, because we are just having one saṅkappa at any given time. We are just thinking about one thing at a time. But in terms of intention, we're also receiving the byproduct of a lot of different saṅkappas over a long period of time. And so we might set an intention like, I'm going to open the door. So we get up and we go and we open the door. And now that intention is done. But we might also set an intention like, I'm going to make dinner. And if we zoom out a little, we realize that this is still an intention. Yeah, it's still the product of determining a direction or activity, a kamma, action in the world. But it takes a lot longer to do, and there are a lot more little actions involved in it. And so that intention that we might set to make dinner, is going to last longer, because it's going to take longer to resolve itself. Either we make the dinner and then we don't need that intention anymore because it's done, or we try to make the dinner and it doesn't work out and eventually we give up, and order a pizza or something. There's a variety of ways that it can play out, but at any given moment, we probably have a bunch of intentions all kind of packaged up in a body of Saṅkhāra, volitional formations, acting upon us. And some of them we might not even remember. We may have determined that that guy sitting next to us, there was that one time he said something that we really didn't like, and then we decided, I'm never going to talk to him again. I'm having a little fun. But it's like, we might not even remember that we made that decision, but we made it really hard at the time. And then lo and behold, we're around that person, we feel a bit of discomfort, but why? Because we're not actively thinking we want to be around them in this point in time. But this is the danger of intention. And this is why noble right intention always deals with the cessation of intention. We start thinking in a way, it's like, how can we start to clean some of this up? How can we start to resolve some of this? How can we not feed this? Because we want peace. We want to be able to sit here relaxed and calm and cool and nibbana, right? To achieve nibbana. And we don't get that if we have a bunch of sankharas all, bottled up in our physical form that want us to just do something. So how do we clean these out? Well, the first, it all starts, like the Buddha says, with view. This morning, I'd like to suggest that when we're looking, this is the perspective that we take. A sort of relaxed and relinquishing perspective on, maybe I have a lot of intention built up in me at this moment. Well, what could these be? And it's not like, what could these be? If I can just make a list, I'll get to the end of them. But rather, what could these be? And it's sort of like a curiosity. This is one of the factors of success, the iddhipada, is to have interest. What could this volition be coming from? What decisions could I have made that are still carrying weight in my body, in my mind, in my speech, in my actions, that are still trying to impel me to do something? And in just activating this part of right view and recognizing that this is part of suffering, it's part of the mess, we are not feeding it. That this exploration, this curiosity about, like, what is it my body is trying to get me to do, is part of right intention, because we are cultivating, as the Buddha says, that noble Saṅkappa, that noble right thinking that deals with the end of things, the relinquishment of things, the cessation of things. We're trying to figure things out in a way that allows us to be free of them. So in the moments when we're doing this, we're already doing noble, right intention. And it might not have immediate results. I don't guarantee that the moment you're like, hey, what is my intention? You're gonna be like, oh, I don't have one, I'm free. If it were that easy, I would just say, well, just sit there and don't have an intention. But that would actually be an intention, and that would probably create more suffering. So instead, we've got to work on not creating intentions and understanding intentions, and relinquishing intentions. And through that process, we are conditioning that freedom from intention to come about. What will it feel like? Well, it'll feel like being in tune with the world and being relaxed, being calm, and not being full of this decision making, like I should do this, or I should not do that, or I should avoid this, or I should get that. But more like, it's like this. To borrow Ajahn Sumedho's, it's like this. That's actually a very noble sort of place to be thinking. It's like, this is the way it is. This is the way it is. Rather than this is me, and what do I want this me to do? Just, it's like this. This is the reality that I'm perceiving. Okay. So now we're going to break things up. It's getting kind of close to the top of the hour, and we'll be going for 2 hours. Yeah, I think 2 hours. So as always, I suggest what works great if you're in a communal setting or you're just trying to divide your time is just look on the half hour and decide, do I want to sit or do I want to walk? And if you want to sit, keep sitting. If you want to keep walking, keep walking. But divide your things up on the half hour, and then during that half hour, just go with whatever posture you're in and continue to develop your meditation. And in this way, it can be a very relaxing and yet structured day. Okay, so be right here with you.